Hello, everyone. How are you? I am excited to be here. Let's see what we can do with color today, shall we? You know, there are so many colors available out there, and we've been talking a lot on the group page about color. And I thought that I would jump on here and do a little live stream for you guys about mixing primary colors, because not only are you trying at this point probably to figure out what colors to mix, but you're also probably trying to figure out how to mix them or what is going on with your colors, all kinds of things, right? So I thought this might be a really nice lesson that is also going to be part of one of our group classes for the Facebook group, which is the watercolor for beginners class. So be sure to go check it out at jacquelinejax.com if you want to take lessons with me, because I think you'll really enjoy it. And we have 27,000 students over on the group page on Facebook, all enjoying this conversation and just talking about watercolor. So I have a nice cup of coffee here and you know what, I'm going to put it over on the warmer because I guarantee if I leave it here, I will dip it into my water. I have two waters here. I have one for dirty water. I have a rag on hand to wipe my brush, and I have clean water because when you're dealing with mixing, you always want to have a clean water on hand as well. For the stream, let's see if we can move this camera over just a bit so that you guys can, there we go, can see more of the water as well as my mix. So what I did here is I taped up this watercolor paper. This is one of my sketchbooks, my accordion sketchbooks that I make for the granulating watercolor class. And I love these things because you can take a 33 or 30-inch piece of watercolor paper, 100% cotton, and you can literally turn it into a 30-page sketchbook for $4 or $5, which, you know, there's no excuse not to be able to paint on really great paper. This is Fabriano Artistico. It is such a great paper. It's second to my Arch paper, but the Arch is still a little pricey to get the sheets. It just depends on where you are. So if you can get the sheets, then definitely get them. Let me check my color here and make sure that the colors look really, really good so far. So I'm always kind of checking to make sure on my my live streams that the colors are as close as possible to what you expect them to be when you're painting. And I think I'm pretty good on the adjustments. Right now we are live streaming on the Facebook group page, which is linked up in the bio on YouTube as well as on YouTube. So for my brushes here, I'm going to do a little bit of a different brush review for you, talking about the Princeton Aqua Elite versus the Princeton Neptune line, as opposed to the very first line they came out with that I think some people are still painting with. And I'm sure I have one, yeah, which is the Princeton Velvet Touch. Now remember, the Velvet Touch is like their cheaper line, and it's a mixed media brush. So if you have Velvet Touch, you're not really getting the benefits that Princeton has to offer from the watercolor brushes. So you want to make sure that you upgrade your brushes, you know, as soon as possible, because these don't hold a lot of water and they're prone to streaking and giving you a lot of hard times because they are more, I think, of an acrylic or a gouache brush pushing like color around rather than adding water. You want to kind of have that nice water mix in your brushes. And so they designed two lines for that. And one is the Princeton Aqua Elite line, which has a full line of brushes that I reviewed on the YouTube channel. And then the Princeton Neptune line with these beautiful glass handles. These are like sea glass handles. And the regular ones are like the Princeton Neptune. They have these beautiful wood handles, kind of like a wood grain look to them. They're really pretty. Anyway, they literally last you a long time. They're professional brushes and they're so well priced, both on Amazon and Jackson's. If you want to use my affiliate link for Jackson's and you haven't shopped there before, you'll get a 10% discount. Hi to everybody. Hi, guys. It's nice to see you. And then also the Amazon store we have linked up from the group pages. And by the way, 100% of the commissions that are generated at no cost to you for using the group affiliate links are what is funding our giveaways. So how that works is we have weekly challenges in the group page and here on YouTube, and I pick a winner. And if I have enough affiliate income, then I pick 2 winners or more, or I upgrade the prizes. So I have an Amazon shop picked out with stuff that you can pick from if you win the challenge. And I hope to be able to pick more winners every week, not just one, but maybe 2 or 3, and make sure that we build up those prizes depending on how much the affiliate links actually generate. But just to give you an idea, it's like a little bit. So literally, sometimes I'm even paying these out of my pocket, but I don't really mind because I think it's so much fun to get presents, and I really love being able to provide them for you guys. So just use the affiliate links whenever you can, if you can, please. Okay, so today we're going to be mixing 3 primaries. Lemon, I chose Permanent Carmine, which is PV19 from Schmincke, and Ultra Finest. Instead of the French Ultra, which is the more granulating one, I chose Ultra Finest. For those of you who might not like granulating colors, you can use either one. This is the lemon. It's a really bright PY3, beautiful, high saturated color, and the Permanent Carmine, which I love for mixing as well as using by itself. It's just such a gorgeous color. White Nights also has a great carmine. I love this one by Schmincke because it's so easy to use, but I also find that the White Nights one is delicious. It really is. So as a comparison, and White Nights also has a really great yellow, and I like their ultramarine blue too. So you can't really go wrong if you want to do primaries out of White Nights. Those 3 I completely love, but I just tend to like Schmincke because they're consistent, light, fast, high rated, and professional. And I never, ever, I can depend on them, you know, so I just have a lot of them. Any case, I am going to be doing the same kind of exercise with Sennelier coming up, as well as M-Gram, because I have more colors coming from them. So this that I have laid out here is going to be done in a couple of different ways. One, we're going to, let's wet our lemon here really well. So I put a decent amount of water in here. This Aqua Elite is more like, it's got the snap of sable. So they call it a synthetic sable brush. And I think it's very, very close to sable. It holds a decent amount of water and delivers a good amount of pigment. And it's terrific for glazing as well as just laying down pretty hard washes of color. If you want things that are more washed and more loose, then you definitely want to go with the top of their line, which is the Neptune, which is like synthetic squirrel. So less snap, more water distribution. So for here, I'm going to start just by laying in a nice amount of color, and I'm putting a lot of this yellow on my palette so we can play with it. And I'm going to do like the deeper color here on my pattern and the deeper color here. And this might even be, depending on your likes and dislikes, that you want to build this color up very strongly in this first block. I really do. I like to build it up, and then I'm going to just kind of spread the extra because I'm going to need it. Rinse the brush out. And then we're going to do something called pulling. So pulling is, I'm going to take my second brush, which is the angle shader, 1/2 inch, get some clean water in the brush. So you get a decent amount of clean water, and starting at the outside of where you're painting to the inside. See, these just don't have enough water for pulling, but I had to dip it twice. That's okay. So right now I'm meeting the color with water, and that is pulling this over. And depending on the binder and the flow of your watercolor, it's going to pull a lot harder than others. So Schmincke is medium road, right? Like I noticed some colors pull a little bit faster, a little bit more, but on as a whole, they are not hard to control for the professional watercolor. Not like Core. Core is going to bully every single color, but they're brilliant and they're so fun to use. So I'm just kind of removing a little bit of this color, which is The Aqua Elite are great for that because they are synthetic sable. So they're a little stronger, a little more snappy. So they remove color very, very well, which also, if you have velvet touch brushes already that you picked up on sale or something, you can use those to remove color really great. Those are very good to remove color. So I just removed a little bit so that we have this like kind of really light glazy wash on one side and more color on the other. And that's just for fun. That's just to like show you the wash. It's hard to tell in the yellow, you know. Now on here, I'm going to start washing the yellow out. So I'm starting with a little bit less yellow than I had. So this first square, and then I'm just going to keep dipping it in the water and rubbing it in my palette. And we're going to see what we get for the values. And again, I really think this is the lightest that I want to show this at. So very, very light. It's not even enough. And I put the heavier one over the text so you can see what it's like. So let's add just a bit more shade to this one, just a bit more value. Because there's a big jump between these shifts. So what I'm trying for in this first box is I'm trying for the strongest to the weakest. So we're going to leave that as the weakest, and then we're just going to kind of build this up as like a little bit more. So I'm starting to see the color, and we definitely want to go a little bit more here because we need something in between the two. So sometimes you have to kind of go back and forth and just kind of build these colors up. And even if they dry and you feel like you didn't really represent them like they should have been represented, you can go back with a glaze. It's better to start lighter and build up colors. That's one thing that Schmincke, Sennelier, even M-Gram and Mission Gold all do really, really well. They build up color very evenly without streaks. I haven't tried it with White Nights. I have not tried any glazes with them, so I wouldn't know. We'd have to do that on something like this, but that looks good for the light. That's kind of nice in between. I feel like this could just be a tad darker though, so I'm going to go over it. Now we're just going to let that dry. But if you notice no streaking, it's really, really wonderful. Permanent Carmine is the next one, so we're going to start wetting this out here. Schmincke really re-wets well. You don't have to it does not take long at all. And that's going to go here in this section. And I think for this one, I'm going to paint the strongest bit here. And here. Right out of my pan. Somebody asked me yesterday and the day before that, pans versus tubes. So let me tell you the basics in professional watercolor. I'm talking about the ones that I use, which is specifically Schmincke, Sennelier, Mission Gold, Roman Schmal, and I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, and now M-Gram. So in these particular, or Daniel Smith as well, in these particular paints, pans versus tubes, it goes like this. When you have a pan, it's much drier, right? So it dries out and you have to re-wet it. To re-wet, you just want to keep adding water or spray it with water and get it really juicy. And that's going to give you the boldest amount of color. So like if we want bold color like that, we have to really get it wet. Out of the tube, it's already wet. So when you're pulling something out of a tube, it's literally it's already in its moist form. So it's going to like explode out of the tube most likely. And so you put it in your palette and you've already got the high vibrancy, like most amount of color that you're going to get. And you don't have to build it up necessarily, because when you get it on your brush, unless you like use a ceramic palette to kind of like wash it out, it literally is going to give you the highest pigment load and you're going to waste the most paint. I wouldn't say waste, but use the most paint because it's just going to attach to your brush. So you always want to like put it on your palette and then kind of like smear it out just a bit like that, right? Because that will give you that ability to not only use the wet paint with like a palette knife or like a lot of dry brushing or something, but and then plus you'll get a lot more pans out of one tube of paint like this. Like you'll get like a lot of them. Like I would say, I think it's like almost 5 half or full pans out of a big tube of paint. So it's more cost effective to buy the tubes, but at the same time, a lot of people don't want to invest that right up front. So before my carmine dries here, and it's almost pretty dry, I am going to do the same thing. We're going to pull. Yeah, so that's the thing. I use both. I always pour my tubes into pans and keep pans on hand in all of these little sets, like so that I can pull them out. And then I can take them with me and I can make little travel palettes out of them. But at the same time, I always keep a lot of tubes on hand because I love to do like palette knife painting with watercolors. And that's what that does really, really well. Palette knife painting is a very loose, like landscape painting, for instance, or florals. And what you do is you take the paint, you put it on a palette knife like this, and you're like dragging it across, and then you add the water, or you spray it, or you can do it on a wet on wet type of thing. So I do a lot of that for my landscapes that I do for sale. And it's really lovely because you can just get crazy with the water. In fact, somebody asked me to do a course on that. It's a more advanced course, but I'm considering it. So that's how I use tubes over pans, but still, pans are great. I just find personally, I get more value out of buying the tubes rather than the pans whenever possible. Okay, so now we're going to work on this. So you see here, I've done this nice bleed. I'm going to let it dry a little bit before I work with it because it is very, very wet. And I want to just kind of like tilt it a little bit and let it go. And we'll just see what happens, you know? So while I'm tilting, I'm going to lay down some washes of color. So let's start in the center and see what we got. All right, that's good for a light. So let's do this one, very light. I'm just going to go over it a couple of times so that we wet the paper with the paint. If you just do one swipe, your paper is not wet yet because I'm doing like damp on dry. It's not wet on dry. Wet on dry would be more of the Neptune brush. This is just a kind of a damp brush. So we got a nice even color. Let's grab some more and we'll start building this one up. And grab a little more. And I'm going to put that 4th one right there. So what this teaches you is how to manage your washes, how much color versus how much water. And also it's going to give you a little bit of teaching on glazing. So with whatever color you're using, you're going to find out if it streaks on this lesson. You're going to find out how it disperses in water. If going over it a lot actually produces unsightly blooms that you're not trying to get and you can't get a smooth wash like this, then that's the paint and the paper. Good paper is really, really important for that reason, you know? If you add too much water, you're going to learn water control, brush control, how your brushes are performing for you. So that simple little lesson teaches you a lot of things, you know? So I'm just building this up and I'm actually going to add a little more to here because I really want to get this into that bright, bright mass tone. And then I want this one just below it. And don't worry, we're going to mix all this stuff together so we can make a mess on our palette. I'm using just a glass palette here. That's why it's good to have a lot of palettes on hand. So this one has to dry a little bit before we can do a glaze. That's good for the second one for sure. And let's check over here. This is looking really nice. It's got a nice little bleed. That looks like fun. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to leave it just like it is because I kind of like the light dry shift up there. I even got a little dry shift on my yellow. Okay, let's move on and work on ultra finest while these are drying. We can always go back. So I haven't re-wet this one, and you can see ultra finest, this is what you can expect. after 3 passes, you start to build up the color and get to a really, really nice deep version of this color. This is great for skies, great for just mixing because it doesn't have too much granulation, so you can kind of play with it a lot. Look at that beautiful color. Isn't that beautiful? So pretty. This is one of my favorite ultramarines. I just love it. It never gives me a problem at all. So I'm going to dilute it out and just leave all this extra watercolor on my page. There's that sky color. Isn't that beautiful for skies? You can also do a light wash of this blue and then drop in some of the darker shade of it. And that's a really nice thing to do as well. I'm going to bring that over here and I'm going to paint the most intense block in the center. So now we have our 3 primaries. And the primaries can be any pure pigment, yellow, red, or blue. I say pure pigment because you're going to be mixing at least at some point 3 together, and you don't want a lot of shades, but you can do this exercise with any 3 colors that you like, and it teaches you about those colors. So if you have 3 really great shades that you love and you want to see how they interact and play with each other, then I suggest you do a page like this in your sketchbook. It's a great way to learn about your paint. In fact, you should really do it with every single paint you have. Just break them up into 3s and just start playing with them. You always want you always want a primary. So you don't want, well, you can do it with orange as your yellow if you want. There are like Indian yellows. Quin Gold makes a good one so that you can find out what's going on. Just be careful to try to put cools and warms in groups because you will have a little more, I mean, it's good for you to learn it, but you'll have a little more of a challenge with your color mixes and you might not be getting what you want if you're using really opposite. Like say you take a very, very warm yellow and you mix it with a very cool pink. It's going to give you a very like muddy kind of orange or like I would say like a dirty orange. Not a bad color, but at the same time, probably not what you're expecting. There we go. So I can build this up as it dries if I want to get a lot more color. I find that this ultramarine, this finest, is really easy for beginners to deal with because it starts out pretty light. So your washes can be light very easily without you really having to manipulate them too much. Go ahead and put another wash here and add a little water. Do another wash here and we'll see what happens. So that's a pretty good second wash. I think we could go a little darker. Ultra finest. Well, I would say all ultramarines have a little bit of granulation to them. I can't think of one that doesn't have some granulation in it, but overall they all have some. I'm going to tilt my page just a bit because I have a little bit of extra water there and I just want I want the bead to travel. And then I'm going to build up this color just a bit more. Again, with a color like Ultramarine Finest, a lot of times building up the color requires it to dry in between glazes. Otherwise, because of the granulation, you might get a little bit of a backwash or just a touch of like blooming because the paper is already wet. And you can see it literally, like I would have to just kind of drop the color in like that. And it's because it's a transparent and it's not a heavily staining color. So transparents I love to work with because you build the colors up in glazes, which is what we're going to do on that second one. Okay, so this is all looking great. Now let's start mixing colors together. So first, obviously, we're going to take the yellow and a little bit of our pink. So these two washes together are going to make that really, really nice little kind of like peachy yellow. And I'm actually looking right now where I can lean a little more peach if I just go more towards my carmine. And that's really pretty. It's light, but let's get a little more carmine and a little more intense yellow together. And let's let that sink into the page. Beautiful. So that's a really pretty shade. I'm still going to go a little more intense by grabbing some more of this yellow and really dipping it into the carmine just a bit more, because I'm not really doing shades here as much as I'm looking for colors. But it's a really beautiful, clear, orangey color that I like. So I'm going to put that one right here because it's a nice kind of even mix of our carmine and our yellow. And I can build the color up just by, as this paper gets wet and sinks it in, I can add just a bit more. That's a really pretty wash. Now, if you wanted to mix more brilliant version of this, you just get more of the, use two brushes, get more of the yellow and more of the carmine, then mix them together. Adding carmine into the yellow. So instead of yellow into carmine, add the bright into the less bright. So like the more staining color goes into the lighter color, and you won't feel like you're working against yourself, because adding carmine is a lot easier than adding yellow. Adding yellow, you could mix a lot of paint that way. So see how much it's just like darker, more brilliant, and a bit more orange, like goldy orange. So now on this exercise, you notice I'm kind of choosing what my next color will be. I'm not putting every color like I normally do down. I'm choosing blocks. So now if we want to learn what it's going to do from this bright, adding more yellow, let's just kind of start smearing it into the yellow to get more of that golden color, that golden color tone. So we took our orange mix and we added more yellow, and we got like almost like a Quinn Gold, right? And Quinn Gold is PY 150, which is transparent yellow, and PR 101, which is a red. So you're going to get a gold shade. Isn't that a beautiful shade too? And if you notice, this is what you can expect from Schmincke, is this really, really nice, clear color. So rinse my brush out so I have a brush that I can dip back into my yellow. And again, I'm going to add yellow to that shade. And that's going to go right here. So now we're kind of like in this cad sunny yellow phase right now, almost leaning towards Sennelier's Sophie, which I love so much. And that will be this last one here. Isn't that great? Now, one that you can do here is even just a little bit more yellow, a little bit lighter shade of this. Yeah, that's really pretty. That even looks more like Sophie. There we go. So we got our yellows leaning to oranges, and we kind of like learned how to mix those. So now as we're heading towards here, we're going to start mixing with the blue. So rather than take this, we're actually going to start leaning this way for the carmine because I want to use this up. So I'm going to start mixing in some of my carmine into that mixture that we already have so that we can just kind of get it to be a little more carmine into that orange. And you can see how bright you can get depending on how thick you mix in. Now, this is a stage where tube paint really excels, because if I had tube paint here, this would be even more bold and brighter, but still Schmincke will give you very, very bright colors. So I actually think that I can paint some of that brighter orange right there as a glaze. Just because, why not? Just because, why not? Okay, so now this is going to start leaning towards the blues and the greens. We're going to make those next. So remember, we're over here adding a little more carmine to the orange and just working that in. Paint this little area here. A nice dark version of it. And then we can get a little bit lighter shade just by mixing in the rest of those oranges. Really lovely. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to see what happens when I add blue to this mix. So we're starting to get a little more neutral. And I think that would be a good shade to represent here, because I'm going to go ahead and add a little more, because it really does illustrate what a beautiful, like, caput mortem color we're getting. This is like a really beautiful, like, pinky brown. If you've ever looked at Caput Mortem by Sennelier, it's a gorgeous color. I actually have it right here. So I just brought it into the studio and restocked so I can play with it. So this one is PR, I think it's 101. Is it PR 101? PR 101, Sennelier's Caput Mortem. So there's that. Now, of course, it's not going to be exactly that shade, but we got really close. And this illustrates a point. The point is that there's more than one way to get to a color. Look at how close that is. Doesn't it look identical? Yeah. So, like, you don't necessarily have to have all the convenience colors if you learn to mix. But getting back to that shade requires a little more focus, right? Because if you add a little more carmine, you could lean a little away from this. So I add a little more blue to it, and then I'm leaning a little more too much blue. So see, you got to kind of like go back and forth and work it between the orange and the blue to get that pinky kind of shade. But I mean, you can't really get any closer than that, right? That first mix was identical color. Isn't that funny? Okay, so now we're going to keep adding blue to our mix. So we're just working over here. I actually think I'm going to start moving some of this over here, because this is going to be our very, very nice neutral tint, which I can put here. Forgot to put the Caput Mortem there, but that's okay. I can actually just get back to that color this way. There we go. I love mixing colors. This is like coffee in the morning. My flowers are out though right now on my patio, and I'm going to be painting those today. So I'll try and get some, I'll try and get a little bit of footage for you guys to enjoy the flowers and see how I like my setup outside. Okay, back to this gray. I'm going to get some more of this, mix it in. And what I'm trying to do is I'm using the ultramarine to get rid of the pink from the carmine to give us more of that even neutral tint. So using more of the ultramarine gives us that neutral tint, which makes me think I should move down here a little bit more. However, I'm going to be adding more red to this mix now, because now we want to go purple. And in order to get purple, you need a lot more carmine mixed into your blue. So you can see this shade here went wine first. So the wine, can you believe we just went from that neutral tint to this wine? Isn't that beautiful? One of my favorites. I love making wine. You wouldn't think that you would get such a moody shade from this color palette, but by bringing it the way I brought it around from the orange, that's how you're getting that really, really interesting moody shade. Let's add a little more blue. So I'm leaning a little more violet now. So we're getting a lot more mood to it. If this was a granulating, it would be even moodier. So you get a little bit different. All the PB29s, which is ultramarine, they are not all the same at all. You have to try them. And I try to go through every single one of them on my channels here for you guys. Hi there. Hi, Terry. How are you guys? Hi, Jana. How are you? I hope you guys are having a good time. Hey, Alex. Do you buy the colors in full pans or pour them yourself? Yeah. See, that's what I started with, actually. So I do both. It depends. Like Roman Schmal does not make tubes yet, so I have to buy them in pans. So I bought the wood box set, and I absolutely love it. Look at that wine color. So pretty. What am I doing? I'm going to mix more blue here with this. So in that case scenario, I did have to buy the pans. Other than that, you know, like when I look and I'm going to pay like $10 for a pan, I have empty pans in the studio. So I feel like if I'm going to pay $10 for a pan, but it's like $12 or $14 for a tube of paint. And I just did this recently with Sennelier because I just wanted to like order a bunch more Sennelier. So like this tube is 10 mLs, and on Jackson's, it costs so much less. It's almost equal to get this as compared to a poured pan. And I can get several full pans out of this tube. So far I've only used half the tube, and I have 3 full pans out of it. So I think I'm going to get close to 5 full pans out of this. So why pay $10 for a pan when I can buy a tube? You know what I mean? And even if the tube, say I have to buy it on Amazon or something and it's not on sale, and say it costs me like $10, $12, $14, I'm still getting a lot more paint that way, and the flexibility of the paint. So what I was saying earlier in the broadcast today, the flexibility of having tube on hand is that you can make your own pans, but you can also use a palette knife and do a lot of like really cool effects, right? And I think that that's really important to be able to do that. So I always use ceramic mixing palettes like these that come in some of the sets, and I just pour the paint right in, and I'm like literally making my own colors, and it's more bold that way. As you can tell here from what I've been doing, I have to dig out a lot more paint, which takes more time. If I just put a dollop of paint, I would have been through these mixes a lot faster, and the mixes would have been brighter and more bold, and I would be watering them down to get them back. So let's make some room on my palette here, because we're going green. We're going green. Oops. This is just water. And I use these little white sponges all the time because they're really good to clean the palettes off, you know? I find that they just take all the little bits off. And if you have a plastic palette that's stained, definitely rub it with one of those, because those white sponges, they will clean that palette. Okay, there we go. There, we're ready. So back to our grind here. So we're going to go back to the yellow. So I need a very clean brush for my yellow. I'm just putting a lot of it here. So this is like less than a tiny little dollop of paint that comes out of a tube. So that really gives you a idea, you know, like this would be just not even a pea size, right? So I really have to get a lot here to build up the intensity. And if you're working on a brand new plastic palette, you know how it just won't come off the brush. That's why ceramic or glass is the best. So there, that is not even equivalent right here. What I just put in this area, that's not even equivalent to a little pea size of watercolor. That is so little, you know? So I have blue on my Princeton Neptune brush, and I have yellow on my Angular Shader by Princeton Aqua Elite. And we're going to just start smearing the two together. That's the fun part. Add a little water. This is the squirrel brush. I love this brush. This one is actually the 1/4 inch brush, but I have them in 4 sizes. So this is what I'm trying for, is I'm starting with an equal mix of the two. If I can get a nice equal mix of the two, I'm going to see what the green shade looks like. And I'm going to lean here just to see where I'm at. See the brighten? And then I'm going to lean here just to see where I'm at, because I want to see what my options are as far as what I'm going to lay down on the paper. So this is a really pretty like teal shade right here, which I'm going to pick as one of my shades. So let's put the teal shade. See how this brush just grabs, it just delivers color so nicely along with water. So much different lay down. The color lays down way more easily and really even. That's why Neptune is the top of the line for watercolor and for watercolor brushes as far as Princeton goes. So let's put, wait, where am I? So this is going to be the one that leans more towards the blue. So just go ahead and put that there. Now there's another shade, of course, a billion shades that we can get in between this shade and this shade, but we don't have enough room on my blocks. So I'm just doing it this way. But isn't this is like one of my favorite teals. I think it's beautiful. I've also made some really great turquoises just by mixing the two phthalos, phthalo blue and phthalo green together. And then you can add a little Prussian to it or a little bit of ultramarine, and you get something really fun, you know? Now let's kind of move this over towards those middle greens. And that's still a little too the same. I want a little more dramatic. I'm going for forest, like a forest green or an olive green kind of tone. And I got it. There we go. So this one, again, reflects that we're still more blue than yellow, right? We're not equal. We're kind of approaching equal mixes of blue and yellow. And so that's going to go midway in between the blue and yellow. And that's going to be our mix. Now, if you wanted to brighten this, you could brighten this green with a little phthalo green or a little phthalo blue, and you would get more turquoise, which is really fun. A little brightener. Phthalos brighten everything. So now I'm mixing this color into a little more yellow. So we're going more towards the greens. That's a really nice green. This is like a sap green. For those of you who like sap green, that's where we are right now. It's more sap than olive. Pretty, really pretty. Actually, it could be even a little hooker's green, but I think it's more sap green. So this just shows you that there are lots of shades in between these two, because even between this one and this one, you've got a bunch of shades that you could have. And look at that even wash coming off that Neptune brush and how it builds up color. It's just my favorite brush. I love the Neptunes. When people tell me, oh no, I have the Velvet Touch and that's better. It is not better. This is way better. I can't get anything like that with a Velvet Touch brush. Like here's the Velvet Touch. I put it in water, I grab some paint, and you get dry brush. You get nothing. So it's frustrating. You'll get streaks and everything. So don't listen to people when they say that the Princeton Velvet Touch, these are the older brushes. They are mixed media brushes. They are not watercolor brushes. Watercolor brushes are like Neptune brush. They should be doing this and performing like this for you. If you want dry brush effect, you can get dry brush effect, but it's a lot juicier and the colors are so much more vibrant coming off of the Neptune brush. Even at this size, this is a 1/4 inch, which is a tiny, tiny brush. So like, look at that. Look at how much color I can still get even with all the wash. And I can, with this tiny little brush, I can do a very even wash just by adding water. You cannot do that with the old brushes from Princeton. The old brush set, that Velvet Touch, just isn't meant for it. It never was. It's a mixed media brush that is more suited for gouache and acrylic than anything else. Neptune is one that is super flexible and is going to give you an equal distribution of water and color. And then this one, being more like sable, I would say is a lot stiffer and will help you do glazes as well as more like fine work. So like if you wanted to take like, you know, very, very strong paint and you wanted to add glazes, then you would kind of play with the amount of paint that's on your brush versus water. And you would just kind of do more exact glazes like that with it. But you can still do it with the Neptune because the Neptune offers you both. But see the kind of color value that the Neptune even gives you? The only thing is it doesn't have as much snap. So you do have to be a little bit better with your painting skills. See what I mean? Easy peasy. Brushes, water, brushes, paint, and paper make everything easier. So now I'm trying for like the brightest shade of this watercolor. Now, because I have this brush, I am getting a higher pigment load than I would if I used another brush. And that's why I switched to this brush when dealing with my yellows and greens, because it just does enhance the color. There's something about the amount of pigment and water that it has where it just is really meant to bring out the best in your watercolor. And that's why I got that. I would not have gotten this bright, bold version of this color if I wouldn't have used this brush. You have to use a brush that is for watercolor that has an equal distribution of the paint and the water. It just simply will look washed out with a lot of other brushes. So if you want that nice pigment load, use 100% cotton paper, use a really nice brush, and these aren't that expensive, and a good quality watercolor, and you'll get these nice, bold, bright colors. Isn't this cool? All right, let's pull this apart and see how it looks. This is so much fun. We have a little cup of coffee. This makes my day. This is like my morning. Even though it's the afternoon right now, by the time I actually got to this, I do have a lot on my plate these days. All right, so we're carefully lifting. Now, if your tape doesn't lift, either your tape is too sticky, so you want to like take a like a heating tool. Do I have one in here? I do. So something like this, like a heating tool, you would kind of heat it up, but be careful if your watercolor isn't dry and there's any puddles, it's going to cause blooms. So you want to just kind of heat this up, but you don't need to do it with the blue tape that I have linked up in the Amazon studio. That's a specific tape that it just doesn't give me a hard time, but I can say 100% watercolor paper makes a big difference. If you're using wood pulp paper or, you know, a paper that is like a paper, it will tear it. So if you're finding that your tape is tearing at your paper, it's the paper or the amount of stickiness on the tape. And you know, it's funny because if you try to take some of the stickiness away, then you don't get the crisp lines. You get a struggle, right? You end up with bleeding underneath the tape because it hasn't stuck enough. So I have found that this is my favorite one, and it's a really inexpensive tape. It's not a fancy watercolor tape. It's super inexpensive, and it comes in all sizes. This is the 1/4 inch. So this one is the thinner one, and then there's like 2 other sizes from this. I use it just for all of these things. Like I'm working on the Schmincke watercolor sheets right now of all of my watercolors in my collection. And this is from the big set of watercolor. I'll show it to you. They're just brilliant, right? So I'm doing glazes right now, and those are taped up. So they're going to be on there for days. And I know that if you've ever left tape on your paper for days, you know what that does. So this is the Schmincke set. I don't even know if you'll be able to see this because it's so big, but this is the wood box set. I love this thing. It is amazing. I pulled out a lot of my colors right now because I'm using them in other places, but it comes with 48 colors, and I put like the sheet here that I'm working on. And it comes with brushes. And then this area here didn't have watercolor in it. I'm actually using it to store more watercolors. And here it comes with a mixing palette that I actually took out because I'm just using it to put like every color that I have. This is the mixing palette it comes with. I love that set. So if you do want to, I don't know, treat yourself, maybe come Christmas time or for your birthday, sometime in summer, they usually have a nice sale coming up here in August. Hopefully they'll do their watercolor sale again. And then we can all buy Schmincke. Okay, so this is the Schmincke watercolor primary mix. What do you think, guys? Did we get it? Did we get some beautiful colors? Isn't this a fun and relaxing way to learn how to mix color? Now, of course, let's not discount the random craziness on the other video that I showed you how to mix color like this, because this is also very fun. These are therapeutic ways. This is a little more organized and methodical, right? So it requires a little more brain power. This required no brain power whatsoever. And frankly, it's really fun and exciting to do because it's just like throw caution to the wind and just fill these little squares with as many colors as you can, right? But at the same time, this is the way that you will learn about your watercolor. So things that we learned as a recap is we learned about washes, brushes, and how they control the water. We learned about the different brushes and what they do. We learned about pulling, so using some water to pull the watercolor over. We learned about glazing, which is going over a drier area with more watercolor. We learned about the different brushes and how they glaze, how to prevent this from tearing. We learned about how to prevent blooms in your washes, how to get even distributions of color, how to develop colors all the way through neutrals, and what your colors will actually do. The only thing I was going to do that I forgot is I had this Prussian blue here to be able to show you how to mix like even moodier shades. So we'll have to do that on maybe another one. But as you can tell, as we moved through, because ultramarine has this really beautiful intensity to it, it does bring some mood to this. Like if I were using phthalo blue instead of this blue, we would get very, very bright shades, really bright, almost comical shades, right? So like if that's your jam and you like more like really just bright colors, like crayon colors, then or marker colors, then you would want to use a cleaner blue. But at the same time, remember, you're going to get really fluorescent-y, really bright. I happen to like this mix of like bold, but then also moody shades. So ultramarine works really well. You're going to get another result again, as if you use like Prussian blue is going to be a lot more like indigo-y and a lot more like even moodier, like denim, right? Different shades of denim colors. Cobalt is a really great mixing color as well. Cobalt cerulean, that is going to give you another shade, a lot more maybe, I would say even moodier tones, right? The only way you're going to get really bright is either phthalo blue or phthalo green. So your phthalos are for that. Your quinacridomes are for that as well. Cadmiums add a little bit of mud to things. So if you're working with cadmiums overall, be careful of the muddy mixes because they will give you a little more muddiness. It's probably just based on the lack of transparency. I prefer, for instance, transparent orange to all the cadmium oranges. I love this orange by Schmincke. It's my very favorite orange of all time. I love it. Transparent yellow is also a beautiful color to get from Schmincke. Permanent carmine is what we use today, but magenta is also beautiful. That's PV42. It's such a lovely color. But as you can tell, it's a little more textured than the permanent carmine. I chose permanent carmine from this set because I was using ultramarine finest, which is a smoother version of ultramarine, and lemon yellow, which is a smooth version of yellow. If I chose transparent yellow, then I might actually go with magenta because they're like more textured. And I really love the mix of transparent yellow and magenta because it's so moody. And then you could add cobalt to that, which would be a really interesting pairing with very moody, kind of like shades for fall. You know what I mean? But this is a very summery palette. So for those of you asking, what should I start with? Those are 3 great colors to start with if you just want to like get your feet wet with Schmincke. And then things to add to it would be like Prussian blue is a great add because it is so different than the ultramarine and it adds like shadows and shades, right? So like if I were going with my ultramarine, oh, I got a little bit of ultra, and so this is really light still. Hang on, let's get the good brush. There we go. So you see how the Neptune, now that was a good example of how Neptune just gives you more color. So you don't want to use the brushes that like, can you imagine Velvet Touch? So here's my Prussian. And if I mix my Prussian in there, it almost gets brighter, but it really gets just kind of moodier. See what I mean? See how moody that is? And as I add more Prussian, I haven't even refilled this with water and it's a tiny brush. Look at those even washes this brush does. Isn't this great? I'm telling you, I will tell you guys the truth. I have no reason. I have so many brushes I can't even count them or use them all. I will always tell you the truth about these supplies and what's going to frustrate you. I don't want to see you frustrated. I want to see you become a really amazing artist and fulfilling your dreams as an artist. That's where I want to see you. I want to see great paintings on my group page, and I want to see you taking the lessons and coming out with your own beautiful take on whatever I'm teaching. So see what Prussian does as opposed to just the ultramarine. You see how it just kind of like, it gives you even moodier, right? Even darker, deeper shades. So I think Prussian would be a great addition as a second blue in a palette, you know, just something different. Most people choose cobalt blue or phthalo blue. I happen to love Prussian because I like the moodierness. Now you can still get, like you could get phthalo green shade would be interesting to add. Adding phthalo green. So like if you had ultramarine, phthalo green, and Prussian, you kind of have everything, right? Because if I mix phthalo green with Prussian, it's going to give me almost like a phthalo blue, right? But just a little moodier, which is fine by me. So that would be another idea for this. So far we've got carmine, ultramarine, yellow, Prussian blue is the 4th, phthalo green would be the 5th, magenta would be kind of fun, or you could go scarlet red if you want like a more red. So how about scarlet red as the 6th? Yeah, so that would be like 6 colors that you could totally do, because you can mix all the purples. You don't really need to get purple or violets except when you feel like getting them. You know, like cobalt violet is a beautiful shade, but we can actually mix that. And manganese violet you can't mix because it has so much granulation in it, but you can mix a shade similar to it if you had ultramarine French Ultra, because French Ultra has the granulation, and then you could mix towards that. But basically, if you had permanent carmine and scarlet red, you would have a blue shade of, you know, like a pinky red and a more red, because that's PR 254, which is like my favorite red. I have it in every line. I always get that one. And I always get a PV19 and I always get a magenta. I always get an ultramarine. I try to get a Prussian or some kind of a moody blue. I usually choose a cerulean blue just because I really love the color cerulean. I'm always getting at least one cool and one warm gold or yellow, but then I leans, like I end up getting transparent oranges and quin gold because I just simply can't help myself. I don't really buy yellow ochre. It always comes to me in sets. And the reason why is because that's where muddy mixes happen. But I have showed you in previous tutorials how you can use them to make peaches and really interesting white washes, right? But be careful because when you start to do this with yellow ochre, you're going to get mud. And to save your palette, if you have a bunch of color, use either phthalo green or phthalo blue to pull it out of the mud zone, because that's really the only way to do it. And I can do that for you like right now if you'd like before we leave. So let's destroy this with yellow ochre. So you can see at first it's going to give you, I know this is long. This is made with yellow ochre. So in small amounts, it gives you this really beautiful creamy wash, right? But in larger amounts, then it's going to get, oh, by the way, guys, the question that came in is what ultramarine is this? I'm painting with Schmincke right now. It's all Schmincke. There's a link actually in the description box for it. So this just gave us this creaminess, is a little bit of yellow ochre that I put on first, and then I added the blue. But the thing that happens is, do I have any? Oh, there we go. So as I start to add the yellow ochre, we're going into the olive green, but then we add more. And you can see how much more muddy it starts to get. So you're going to get more coverage because it's not as transparent, and you are going to start developing more muddy looks. So now I'm going to take some of my pink and add this to it. And now you can see we're starting to get kind of like the peaches, but instead of getting that beautiful wine color, I'm starting to get a more muddy kind of color, right? And that's from the yellow ochre because it's got, it's just got more earth in it. So now if I start to mix this all together, we are definitely going to get more mud, more muddy mixes, right? And you're going to be like, oh God, now I've done it. I don't like this. Okay, well, watch what this does to it. Phthalo green. Phthalo green will take over your mix. So adding phthalo green to this muddy area here, and it brought it back into a beautiful, beautiful green. Add a little more phthalo green. And literally, it's going to save any muddy mix. It just will give you something that you'll be like, ooh, I really like to paint with that actually, you know? So see, and I can even go over the muddy mixes with the phthalo mix, and it's changing it. It's changing it away from mud and giving me some of those beautiful shades that you would buy. So I would buy this as like a hooker's green or an olive green. So we went from that ugly brown to just by adding phthalo green. So that's why I would always have a phthalo green and a phthalo blue in my palette, because it's like my savior color. And then alone, you know, it's kind of unrealistic, right? Alone, it's just really, really bright green, but you mix it with any color in your palette and you're going to get like a really clean, very bright color. But as far as saving your palette, phthalo blue and phthalo green will definitely help you save a mix, you know, and then add some more blue to it and you can start all over. Then I can go ahead and add some more pink to it. And now I've got my wine back. So see, I'm not wasting any color because I added the phthalo. And so now I'm developing colors that I actually like. Add more carmine, you'll get more pinky wine. Add more blue and you'll get more violet, purple violet, but at least I'm not dealing with the muddy brown, you know. Again, add more phthalo green. You're like, what? Yeah, add more phthalo green and you'll get this beautiful forest. So you don't have to buy any of these colors because they're all right there. You know, so if you get a muddy mix, try some phthalo blue, phthalo green, and you probably will end up with this great, like, beautiful bunch of colors that you'll want to paint with. You know what I mean? I can actually paint something with this. It's so pretty. I just don't have any. Do I have another sample cart? No, not really. I can use this. Look at this color. This is beautiful. Ooh, can you believe this was mud just like 2 seconds ago? Look at that. Can use that as my shades and shadows. Isn't that pretty? And then just kind of go into my neutrals here. So, and if I wanted something brighter, again, just tap into your phthalo green. And now I have more like of that green shade. So nothing is ever wasted when you have phthalo green or phthalo blue. That's my point. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed the live stream. I took enough of your time, but I think we learned a lot in this. Don't forget, this is one of the typical lessons that you will find in the watercolor sketchbook class for beginners. It's my base class. So it teaches you all about watercolor and shows you some really cool, fun things to paint in your sketchbook as you like go through life and find things that you want to note and just learn about. But every single lesson teaches you so much about using your colors and saving your painting and, you know, and just coming out with something that you love and will have a good time with. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing. It's very generous of you. Oh, you're very welcome. You know what? Listen, watercolor is like my joy. Anytime you see me here, I am having a great time. So I love being here with you guys and I love being in the group with you guys. You all are amazing. I think I'm actually going to save this because I love these colors. I don't want to wipe them away. I actually want to get out something. So maybe on my break, I'll paint something with this. All right. Have a great one, you guys. See you soon.